with everything. So just a couple of things. So we always send out a year-end communication to all of the departments that just kind of outlines reminders for year-end deadlines. That did go out in April. It goes out so early because the first deadline for contracts and purchasing are actually in May. So preparation for year-end starts early. So that did go out, and I've been in communication with the other divisions in finance, and actually year-end is going fairly smoothly so far. People are adhering to those deadlines, which doesn't always happen. So I think we're on a good track for June 30th. We will officially close our books for the year on August 12th. We leave it open just to make sure that we can process as many invoices and such in the correct year as possible to decrease the amount of accruals and such that we need to do. We have the final field work the week of September 19th and September 26th. The auditors will be on site one of those 2 weeks. I believe it's the second week, but I could be wrong about that. And then it is our hope that we will submit a final ACFR to the LGC by October 31st. They do give us that 30-day, extension without any penalty or without us really requesting it. But honestly, my hope is that we will, October 31st, we will be done. So the two new items that we have this year, or really one new item, is the GASB 87. It's our leases. We did decide to go with an outside organization to help us kind of implement that. We sent all of our lease agreements to them. Gosh, I think it's been about 3 or 4 weeks ago, so I should be hearing back from them soon. But we are on track to get all of that implemented and on our books before we get a trial balance to our auditors. So was a little worried about that, but they have jumped in and helped us a lot, so I think we should be good. I don't expect many changes for our single audit. ARPA is the big thing right now, but we did have ARPA funds last year, so I don't think our testing should change very much. I do think next year might be a little bit more of a challenge because we will have all of those kind of pass-through grants to all of these sub-recipients within the community. So I definitely think our testing next year will be more in depth for ARPA. So as you guys know, last year we did have the same finding that we've had a couple of years, and that's just about our year-end processes. We have been trying very hard to fix those. We have unfortunately still had some turnover in finance, so we are not as far forward as I would have liked, but I do feel good. I am so happy that Susan has joined our team. I think, gosh, my days are muddled together right now, so don't remember exactly when she started, but she has jumped in and is helping with just some of the day-to-day stuff with financial reporting, reviewing reconciliations, completing reconciliations. So that has been great. We also hired another accountant to work on AR, accounts receivable stuff. That's a point in finance that I felt like we really didn't have a lot of control over, or we didn't have good oversight. So we have hired someone to really just focus on that aspect. So I feel better than I thought we would, especially with the turnover. I think we're ready for year end. I think we're ready to dig into audit. Reconciliations are up to date. They have been reviewed. And I think with the extra staff, we will be able to have other people prepare and let me really do a final review of things before we send it to the auditor. So we're catching things prior to them seeing it and catching our mistakes. So, any questions?
I just have one question. When do you anticipate having your information back for GASB 87?
So, Scott, I would have to look back through my emails. So they said, so we sent them all of our lease agreements. They said to give them 4 weeks, and I think it is very close to that. So we should be getting it back, honestly, any day. And then we kind of go through the actual implementation of getting it on our books and everything. So they basically do the analysis of what should be included and what shouldn't be included. I definitely still think there's some conversations between them and us that we'll need to have. But I spoke with the auditors, and honestly, they said as long as we have it on our books prior to the close and to a trial balance, that we should be good. So we are pushing it close. I'm not going to say that we're not, but I feel good that by the middle of August, we should be able to be making these journal entries onto the ledger. Gwen?
Thanks, Becky. Question, how did you ensure, because this is really probably the first full time that we've done this, how did you ensure that you had the entire population of leases that the city entered into, is a party to?
So
it's both lease, being a lessee and a lessor, right? If
yes,
I recall.
It is both. So a lot of our leases were managed by real estate. I won't say all of them, but a lot of them were, and they did have a very comprehensive list. So that is where we started. I also had a staff member really kind of go through all of our GL accounts and just see what we were making on a regular basis and pulling documentation to see if possibly it was a lease. We also worked very closely with purchasing. They had actually started, gosh, I think even almost 2 years ago, because that's how long we've almost had to implement this standard, kind of marking new contracts as lease contracts or possible lease contracts. So of course we pulled all of those. And then I also spoke with the management team a couple of times and kind of explained to them what we were looking for. And I actually got a lot of feedback from them as things that could possibly be a lease. So I think that's the hardest thing with this lease, is making sure you have everything. So we have done as in-depth of a review as we can do. I'm not saying that things won't pop up that we missed, but I believe we have a fairly comprehensive list as of right now. So, and it was just real education for the departments as to what we do need to include and what we don't need to include. So,
I mean, the one that surprised me a couple years ago was the property on Orange Street that we have with NCDOT, which is like a, 65-year lease, something really crazy. So I think the concern is if we have something that's, was agreed to a long time ago, but it sounds like you had a pretty good approach to it.
I feel good about it. I won't say that I feel like we have everything. I mean, I do think there might be some things that have fell through the cracks, but I really think we have a very comprehensive list. And we are continuing, of course, to have conversations with people, in case things do come up. This standard is a really weird one. There are really weird rules as to what you have to include and what you don't have to include. A month-to-month lease, you don't have to. A dollar lease, you don't have to. So it was really kind of going through the different things and trying to figure out what did qualify and what didn't. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Becky, and just a follow-up question. Does the city have any type of in-kind type leases? A service is provided in lieu of you providing a service, and I would assume that if you do have it, you would include those items as well, correct?
Yes, we did. I'm not thinking of any that come off my that are in my mind right now. One of the ones that we did make sure we included was, we have a contract with RATP Dev. They're the people that do run our art station. And while it doesn't specifically say that they lease our building, they do use our building. So that is one of the ones that I did pull to send to them just to see if we had some type of underlying lease that we needed to include. We had a couple of those in kind. Scott, I'm not remembering any off the top of my head, but like I said, it's been a couple of weeks since I've looked at those. But yeah, I think we did good outreach to kind of make sure that we were including everything. So.
Yeah, Becky, the things that come to my mind is with Parks and Rec. we will agree to maintain certain properties in return for being able to use the property. So I'm assuming that Parks and Rec was in the loop on that kind of thing. And so that's like when I think of our in kind, those are the ones that pop up for me.
They were, and I know that the agreement we have with ABYSA was definitely included. I want to say that there was one other one. But honestly, since you brought up Parks and Rec, I will just double check with them just to make sure that there is nothing else. Because the other thing is I don't always hear about these. It's sometimes kind of off my preview. So, but I'll definitely reach out to Parks.
Yeah, because like Tuesday night we approved an agreement, and the baseball fields, and I'm going to say the word. No, I'm going to say the word Bowman.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's for youth baseball, and that might be construed as a lease.
Okay, I will definitely check into that one. So, and I'll definitely reach out to someone in Parks to see if there's anything else that just comes to mind for them. So.
Thank you, Becky. Any other questions? Wonderful. Our next item is internal audit program update, and I'll turn this over to Tony McDowell.
Thank you, Chairman Powell. And actually, before I jump into my item, I did just want to mention, so Deborah Campbell from City Manager's office would normally be here, but she is out of the office this afternoon. So sitting in for her is Rachel Wood, our new Assistant City Manager. And I think most of y'all have met her. I'm going to put her on the spot here because she didn't know I was going to do this. But Rachel, if you could just do a quick introduction, because I'm not sure if Andrew and Amy have had a chance to meet you.
Sure. Thanks, Tony. And good afternoon, everyone. Like Tony said, my name is Rachel Wood. I started with the organization on, I believe, January 24th, but I had a bit of a unique start to the organization. I worked for 9 weeks and then had a baby and was out for 8. And so I am in my 3rd week back from maternity leave. So I feel like I've just started all over again. So if you haven't seen me, it's because I had that 2-month reprieve from being in the office, and now I'm back full time. But look forward to working with this group and meeting each of you individually, I'm sure, very soon.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. So just to kind of jump into the update on where we are with our internal audit program, I really want to talk about 2 things today. One is the recruitment for the vacant internal auditor position, and then kind of highlight for you all some of the work that's been going on while that position has been vacant. So first of all, just kind of talk through where we are with the recruitment. I think, as you all know, Patricia Rosenberg, our previous internal auditor, left in October of last year. And soon after that, Kathy Ball, who was our assistant city manager, who was Tricia's supervisor, also left the organization. So Ms. Campbell asked me to head up the recruitment for that position and also kind of lead the internal audit program until we got the position filled. So we've been recruiting for that position since December. We were struggling to find someone to fill that position. It's now active. The recruitment's active again right now on our website for the 3rd time. So if you all know anyone who might be interested, please reach out and encourage them to apply. We did have a couple of candidates that we interviewed. Chairman Powell was on the interview panel for both of those. Neither of those ended up having really the experience or the background that we needed, and that came through in the interviews. So again, we put it back out on our website. We've advertised it on the Association of Local Government Auditors website as well. We also, with this most recent posting, have tweaked the requirements for the position. We were previously requiring a CPA or a CIA, and now we have tweaked that to allow folks who don't have those certifications currently but could obtain those certifications, make them eligible to be part of the applicant pool as well. So hopefully we'll have better luck this time. Like I said, it's been active, I think, on our website for a week or 2 now. I think it closes, or at least we're going to take an initial look again at the applicants 1st of July, and hopefully we'll find some folks in that pool that we can interview and move forward with. So I will stop and see if you all have any questions around the recruitment. If not, I'll give you all an update on what's been going on since Patricia left. All right, seeing none. So like I said, the work on the internal audit program has not stopped with Patricia's departure. And so I think, as you all probably remember, before Patricia left, she was really spending a lot of her time working on the American Rescue Plan program and developing a process around how we were going to allocate those dollars. And so after she left, we hired a coordinator for the ARPA program, Kim Marmon-Sachs, and Kim has really hit the ground running and has worked since last fall with staff and city council to work through the ARPA process, and really has picked up where Patricia had kind of left off. And we're very lucky to get Kim. Kim had a lot of experience doing this kind of stuff in her previous jobs. And so we were able to finish off the initial part of that project on May 10th. And that was when council awarded approximately $11.7 million in ARPA funding to 18 eligible projects. And so now the work on that project has really shifted, and will be shifting over the next few months toward working to get the contracts in place with the agencies, and also then making sure that all of the money that's spent on that program meets the federal guidelines associated with that program. So we feel like we're really in good shape with that program right now. The other thing that's been going on, so because Patricia had been spending a lot of her time over the last few months that she was here working on ARPA, we really decided that the internal audit program really kind of needed a jump start, if you will. And Becky and I have been working on that, and we have been and just talking with our external auditors and others in the field. They've recommended to us that we do an RFP, a request for proposal, to have a risk assessment done for the organization. And I'm sure probably you all are familiar, probably better than me, with what a risk assessment is, but it's essentially it's a document that really kind of informs the development of the audit work plan for a 12 to 24 month period. So what Becky and I did, along with some other staff in finance, was meet with all the department directors. We invited all the department directors to meet with us. Not all did, but those meetings produced a list of areas that we would like to see a contractor do a risk assessment for. And those areas, I won't go into them, but they're covered in the staff report that we sent you all. And so the RFP for that risk assessment just went out. I think it went live yesterday, I believe, and Becky's shaking her head. So, and I can't remember, Becky, if you can recall what the deadline is for when folks, when it closes.
I believe that with questions and an addendum and everything along those lines, I think we have it July 13th, I think, is when we had to do.
Okay. So, so again, our hope is, after the deadline, to quickly do a review of the RFPs. Hopefully we'll get some good responses from folks out in the field. We've heard from the folks we've talked to already, because we talked to our current external auditors, PB Mayers. We also talked to some local firms to get some input, that there is a lot of turnover in that field right now. And because of that, there is a backlog in a lot of firms in terms of being able to do this kind of work. And so it'll be very interesting to see what kind of responses we get. But we hope to be able to award that contract in early fiscal year 23, and then get the risk assessment completed, hopefully within 6 months after award of that contract. And again, that will really kind of guide where we go from here with the internal audit program. And like I said, we did identify 4 potential areas to focus on during the RFP. If you all have any questions about any of those, happy to kind of talk through those as well. So I think that's all I have, and be happy to answer any questions.
Tony, I just had one question. In assessing the RFPs, I would think you would want someone from the audit committee to be a part of that process. However, I would entertain other members to weigh in on this to see what they think as well.
Andrew, did you want, I see you have your hand up.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know if you were going to reply to Scott. So kind of my concern from the emails I was sharing back and forth, and something I've kind of seen generally in the city, it looks like there's a reliance on external vendors, external sources. And while that can be useful, like this request for proposal, and you can get kind of get a snapshot of where you need to focus the new person, it seems like we've gone a very long time without having anyone in this position. So my concern is something may have gone awry. I know a lot of the folks that are dealing with this on a daily basis aren't finance and accounting people. I've dealt with a bunch of project managers in the past, and they are like herding squirrels. So my worry is that the institutional knowledge, without having someone in a day-to-day position there in the city, is diminishing instead of increasing. So to me, that implies additional risk.
So I guess I'll go back to Scott's point first, and I think that's a great idea. I mean, I had not thought about yet who all would be on the review panel for the RFPs, but yeah, if there's any interest from any of y'all on the audit committee to be part of that, I think that would be great to have y'all be part of it.
I nominate Scott.
I do too. Although I guess I can't nominate anybody. So,
Well, I was going to entertain that, but if Andrew would like to be a part of that process, I think and Amy, I think we all can bring some perspective in at least assessing that aspect. Andrew, and I can tell you that as with vacancies here at the district, the city has actively looked for an internal auditor, and I don't know if it's the price point or what has impacted filling that position. It's not like they haven't been trying to fill that position. I can assure you, some of the people that we've interviewed, they definitely didn't have the the skill sets that you would want into that internal audit position. But I have the same concerns that you are. The longer we go without an internal auditor, the potential of things going awry is definitely there.
Right, and I'm not implying that the city was lackadaisical in their search or any of the rest. I looked at the open position, I think a couple of weeks ago. One thing that stuck out to me is the salary seems rather low for what the likely expectations of that position is. So, kind of my thought is, 6 months in and we haven't found anyone, that's probably a point of friction. And this is just kind of one of those, it's not a very interesting, exciting thing for the city to spend its money on, but I do think it is kind of a critical piece of keeping the trains on time, for want of a better phrase.
Amy?
Yeah, I was just curious as to what some of the big the areas that you had the most challenge with the candidates that you interviewed. Like, where were their shortcomings as compared to what we were looking for?
Tony, if you'd like me to weigh in on this one, I definitely can tell you my personal thoughts. You had people that were 3 years removed from college. One individual definitely had her CPA, but she didn't have any internal audit experience. The people that we interviewed, every one of them that we've interviewed, if I'm not mistaken, Tony, you chime in, whereas they had practical accounting experience, they didn't have any internal audit experience. A couple didn't even have public accounting experience, which you're doing audits in relation to being in public accounting. It was I'm still stunned as to the position being vacant. But then again, this is kind of the norm right now in our, not just our profession, but in all facets of government. Everyone has a lot of vacancies out there. but that's just my 2 cents. Tony, you can chime in on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, Scott. I mean, I think we had trouble finding candidates that even qualified for interview. And the 2 that we did interview, like Scott said, one did have a CPA, but did not have a whole lot of experience. The other one actually had federal government experience, and I think we were all kind of excited about the possibility of that interview, and then that did not pan out the way we had hoped that it would. So yeah, it's been challenging, and you know, we definitely realize the importance of getting this position filled, and I do think you know, the salary, the offer salary that we're offering for the position is going to create a challenge because again, there is a lot of opportunity for folks in this field right now. There are a lot of vacancies, as Scott said, and so folks really have a choice of where they go and what they do, and you know, and so I think we're going to continue to have some challenges. I think our plan, I think, is again, we're going to evaluate the applications we get on this 3rd try in July, and if we still don't have anyone that meets qualifications, or if we interview and still in the position is still vacant, we'll probably go back and reassess, potentially look at the salary, potentially look at other options for moving the program forward as well. So,
Gwen?
Well, earlier there was some discussion about outsourcing the internal audit function. And I wondered, you know, where we were on that thinking. I mean, I know that one of the issues that was difficult, I think, for Patricia, and probably would be for anybody, is, you know, sort of a one-person department is lonely, and especially in a function like audit, which probably isn't the most popular function. You know, I was just wondering if maybe outsourcing, you know, especially if we're identifying risk areas, and we could give people, you know, sort of a, you know, okay, here's a task, you know, spend X number of hours on this, versus someone being in the position, you know, full time as an employee. What's been the thinking for that, and especially given the fact that we apparently are having a hard time filling it.
Yeah, we are definitely considering that, and I think that's again one of the considerations. And we've talked about, you know, do we just contract out the entire program, or do we keep the position internally, and instead of it being, you know, essentially an internal auditor like it is now, be more of an internal audit program manager, which again might, with the salary where it's at now, you might be able to attract someone into that position if it's not a position that it's a CPA or something, that's essentially someone who's managing that program and working closely with an external firm that's doing most of the actual audits themselves. So yeah, we're looking at all that. And again, I think where we're going to land is, you know, look at these candidates again that we get. Hopefully we'll get some good ones, look at that in July, and then reassess in the new fiscal year kind of where we want to go. And hopefully, you know, again, we'll have the responses from the RFP around the same time, and so we can get an idea of where we're headed with that as well. So so hopefully we'll have some, you know, some good updates we can provide you all at the next meeting you all have.
Tony, I think personally, I think starting out with a risk assessment, you know, having that in place, because it's been a while since you know, Patricia was here, that after you have that, you know, addressed, then handing an assessment to a outside vendor, if that's the course that you need to do, then by all means, that's a good plan.
Well, and I think, Scott, that's kind of why we decided to start with this. We did, like Tony said, we did consult with our external auditors and then another CPA firm, and they really said, even if we did consider outsourcing this, if we went with an outside firm, this is where they would start with a risk assessment. So we figured we would do that ourselves, and that way we could really see this areas that we needed to focus on, so we could better inform an outside agency if that's who we go with, if that's the decision we go.
Andrew?
one of my concerns with that is, again, I can't imagine that that's going to be the most efficient way in terms of dollars and cents. If you're going to pay an external auditor for 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week worth of work, you're probably paying 2 to 3 times the rate that you would pay the position if they worked in-house. And again, there's a real, it's not necessarily tangible, but there's a real value to institutional knowledge, and you're not developing any of that, at least in that position. Maybe the people that interact with whatever external firm would gain something, but I feel like the city would not. It just doesn't seem like the highest and best use of the money that we would spend for that.
Okay. Oh, there's Scott. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Andrew, I agree in relation to that, but with some of your bigger accounting firms, they do have an internal audit presence in the governmental sector because of just these, the small aspect of some of the smaller entities. Now, Asheville is not a small entity by any means, but I think initially having them do something is far better than waiting another 6 months to find someone to bring in house to do that internal audit. I agree with you. Every day we go by, we're losing institutional knowledge, and I think the first step, the risk assessment. Second step, other round of applicants. And if for some reason there is not a qualified person at that point in time, then I think the best course of action as a stopgap is to at least get someone in here to manage and facilitate that risk assessment and look at areas as opposed to leaving it cold.
I agree with you on that. Certainly it's a function that needs to be done. If we don't have the ability to fill the opening, then as a temporary measure, it makes some sort of sense. My concern is that very few times have I seen a government's temporary measure truly be very temporary. So I would hate to see it become kind of an ongoing thing where instead of having the auditor, we push this work out to external firms.
Hey, Tony, have we considered, and I know this is, I won't say this is taboo, but have we considered reaching out to Buncombe County and possibly, use their resources? I know that might not be the best thing, but I mean, that's an option. And then you have someone that is at least, somewhat local that would understand, those aspects.
Sure, and that's actually a great question and very timely because I don't know if you all saw, there was an article in the newspaper earlier this week about some of the work that the county internal audit program has done recently. And I don't know if you all know, but their internal auditor position was also vacant for a very long time. They did hire someone recently. I think maybe he's been on the job for 6 months or so. And they do have a more robust program in that they have more people in their internal audit function. But Becky and I were actually just talking about, because we read about some of the work they had done in terms of analyzing their departments and kind of ranking them from a risk perspective. And we're going to try and reach out to them and schedule some time to talk to them in the next couple of weeks about the work they did on that. And then just to kind of pick their brain in general about, some of the things we're thinking about doing, some of the challenges we're having, and then things like that as well. And, I think, I guess at some points at points in time, there's been thoughts, I think I would say maybe at both governments about would a consolidated or an internal audit function that covers both city and county, would that be the way to go? I don't know if that would ever come to fruition or not, but I think that might be something to maybe consider down the road as well. But in the short run, we at least want to have some conversations with them to see what they're doing with their program.
One more question, Tony. As Andrew mentioned about price points for the actual position, have we looked at what we're the salary range that we're potentially going to bring this person in, and how does that compare to, say, the Buncombe County that does have internal auditor? Are they comparable, or are they for some reason a little bit lower than what the county's offering? I'm not saying that we're always competing against the county, but if there is if for some reason there is that disparity there, that could be a potential, like Andrew was saying, that is probably, we might want to reconsider that range of pay.
Yeah, and I do know the county classifies their internal auditor as a department director level position that does pay a higher salary than that we're currently offering for our position. I will say we did have a market study done, for all city positions. I guess it's been 2 years ago now, and so the salary that we're offering, at least when that market study was done, and where we ended up classifying the internal audit position internally here, would say that the market, that we are advertising where the market is for that position. Now, I think a lot has changed since then. So I think one of the things, I've been talking to HR about is the flexibility to, if we have to hire above that advertised rate, what that might be. So we're evaluating that as well.
Any other questions? Okay, Tony, thank you. I appreciate the update.
Thank you all.
Our final item is the Office of Data and Performance, and they're going to give us an update.
Hi, everybody. I'm not sure. Eric, are you on?
Yep.
Okay. All right, then. I'm going to share my screen. We appreciate you all giving us a little bit of time today. Let's see. All right. We are the Office of Data and Performance, and we're here to introduce you to who we are and what we do, and also give you an overview of some of the projects that we are working on. So I'm going to allow Eric to introduce himself, and we'll just keep right on going.
Cool. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and we really appreciate you giving us some of your time. My name is Eric Jackson. I manage the Office of Data and Performance. My pronouns are he, him, and his.
Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Bailey. I am the Data Communication Specialist for the Office of Data and Performance. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And our teammate, Cameron Henshaw,
He's here.
Is he here? Okay,
Yes.
Cameron. I'm sorry. I didn't see you on the screen. Excuse me, I'll let you introduce yourself.
All good, all good. My name is Cameron Henshaw. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the performance analyst in the Office of Data and Performance. Nice to meet you all.
Okay, so this is just an overview of our agenda today. We're going to go over our mission, the work that ODAP does, some of our current projects, and how you all can use some of the tools that we utilize every day to do our work, and hopefully have time for a little bit of discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric.
Okay, so this is our mission statement, which you can read for yourselves, but I want to kind of emphasize two things. And the first is that word empower. We don't see ourselves as kind of an internal service function in the sense that you come and we give you data, we do your analysis. Our role is really to enable others to change the way that they're working. And the purpose in that change is really those three things: equity, accountability, and communication. So accountability is ensuring that the results that we're committing to are the results that we deliver, and that we're doing that in an equitable way. And one of the themes that I kind of harp on is that if we're able to name and collectively agree on what the results are that we're trying to achieve, we've established how we're going to tell if we're achieving them, then that is really the foundation of good communication, whether that's communication internally between departments and stakeholders inside the organization, or whether that's between the organization and members in our community. The other thing I wanted to just call out, I'm excited to be here in this particular, you are our final stop on a road tour that started last fall. And I think there are interesting parallels in concern between the audit function and the work that ODAP does. Audit, I think, probably has a little bit more focus on the integrity of process. We have more focus kind of on the results that are coming out, but I think there's a lot of intersection in the way we look at the world and think about it and assess risks and so on. And I think there's some, as this function, kind of gets rebuilt within the organization, I would love for there to be collaboration between those teams. Go ahead to the next slide.
Mhm.
So you saw in the previous slide that what we're talking about isn't just internal. We mentioned in that mission statement both the community and internal staff. And so I want to dig into that a little bit, and I'm going to work backwards. So there is part of our work is very, very internal. We want to make sure, and by internal, I mean it applies basically to ODAP and generally to the IT department staff. We want to make sure that we're creating and maintaining systems that keep the data accessible, accurate, high quality, and we also want to have good governance processes that make sure that we're well protected against kind of intentional attempts to misuse data, but also that we're paying attention and we're not inadvertently causing harm. So moving the circle out a little bit, biggest part of our role then is making sure that we're empowering staff to use data and think in terms of focus on outcomes and impact and how we're going to use data. And by data, by the way, I should point out, sometimes that's numbers, often it's numbers, but very often there are other kinds of data. The key is, are we going to be able to tell in some reasonably objective way that we can all agree on whether something is working or not, so that we can take action if it's not. And then finally, we are not just an internally focused department. A big part of our mission is to make sure that we're properly accountable to the community, that we are providing the tools that allow the community to advocate for themselves, to engage in conversation. And that starts with just understanding what it is the city is doing and how it's going. So making sure that we're conveying all that information and then providing access to the tools and data that allow members in the community to participate and play their part in the process. Next slide. And I'll hand it back to Natalie for a moment.
Okay, so how does ODAP work? Well, we focus on public engagement and the reporting. And there are two components to that. And the first one is developing a standard way to report to the public that is grounded in data. And the reason why we want to do that is because we want to establish a common standardized language that we use amongst each other, but more importantly, that we use with the public. And that goes to reestablishing and rebuilding relationships. We use this language and this framework no matter who we're speaking with, and no matter what community or segment of the community we are engaging with. Again, we don't want folks to think that one area of town or one group or one neighborhood got information delivered to them in one way that that might perpetuate any type of inequity than another group. And so we focus on those standardized ways of reporting and engaging with community members. And then the second bullet point, creating ways that the community can participate in defining the success of programs and services. We truly believe that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so there's nothing like really having a great idea that works in theory, but in practice, it just doesn't happen because we didn't include the community, on the front end. So we make sure that we participate with the community in getting them to provide their input on what success of a program or initiative or a service would look like. Now, that doesn't mean that it will be exactly what the community envisions, because we're the standard, we are the subject matter experts in whatever project or initiative is going on. But certainly we don't want to miss the mark, and you're more apt to miss the mark by delaying community involvement than not. And the second bullet point is data-informed decision-making and integrating data-informed decision-making into all of our key processes within the city. Again, that speaks to the framework and using a common language and integrating that language into our processes that we are developing internally for reporting measures. And so most notably and most recently, we did this with the budget process. I'm going to turn it over to Eric so he can explain a little bit more about that and round out going over this slide.
So our job essentially is to help change how people in the organization, and to some extent outside the organization, change how they do what they do. And that kind of culture change is difficult, but also I've been with the city now for just about 6 years. I was not government before that. One of the things I learned extremely quickly was that if you want a sustainable change in an organization like this, it needs to come through integration with core city processes. And from the beginning, it has been part of our strategy to work with budget on that. One of the things that is going on right now in the city is really exciting, led by Rachel Wood, our new assistant city manager, is integrating also a strong work planning kind of process. And so that just gives us one more standard city process that we can tie into, making sure that we are able to ask the right questions at the right time. What results are you trying to achieve? How are you going to measure? How are you going to tell whether those results are being achieved? And how have we gone through and made sure that everybody is on the same page about both the results and how we're going to tell, so that we have that foundation in communication. The other thing I would point out, we are not a standalone function really in anything that we do. There's nothing we do that doesn't have us in a close partnership with our communications and public engagement department, with our finance department through budget, with our equity department, sustainability department, because we really are trying to integrate in all of our thinking just like those other functions. And so we collaborate very closely. We have an internal governance board that is cross-departmental, so that we're always thinking as an organization rather than just as a function inside of the IT department. A lot of our time is spent on capacity building. We keep talking about trying to change how people what they do what they do, and empowering. So in order to kind of power that change, we do trainings. We have roughly a training every other month. We've got an intro to data-driven decision-making, a more advanced course. We just recently had a really great session facilitated by Aisha Adams on data equity. We have a data communications class that Natalie and Cameron do. So we have regular training. We also have an internal newsletter that goes out twice a month, kind of covering, sometimes it's what ODAP is doing, sometimes it's what a department is doing. Very often it's talking about how do you think about doing this, and trying to give examples so that people can learn. And then we also sponsor an internal collaboration group that meets once a month, that started as a place for people who had done training to kind of bring examples and challenges and get support and feedback from their colleagues. And I think is sort of growing into a little bit more general collaboration group, because it is a completely cross-departmental function where people bring things that they're wrestling with and are able to get perspectives from people who are able to look at that from a different point of view. And then the last function that we really focus on, and I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but it is sort of foundational, is that governance function. Making sure that we've got solid data systems that deliver data, make sure that we've got governance processes to ensure quality and accuracy, and making sure we're doing protection against both malicious actors and getting the right questions in at the right time to capture and assess potential harm that we didn't intend to do. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So these are some of the areas where we've been working over the last year, kind of grouped into some categories. We work to support particular city initiatives. The two that are going on, have been going on for the last little while, are working with the homelessness initiative folks. We've got, I think a couple months ago, and then again recently updated the point in time homeless count dashboard to try and convey in a more intuitive way how many people we have on a given night in the year that are homeless. And later this month, I believe we're going to be launching one that kind of looks at some of the performance measures for our homeless programs. We also did an initial collection of baseline data to provide to the Reparations Commission when they got started. And at this point, we're sort of on standby to provide any additional support that process will need, working with the project management team. We also do ongoing support for key city operations. A big part of this year has been working first with Patricia, and then now with Kim Marmon-Sachs on the American Rescue Plan Act funding. First half of that was all about teeing up good processes for selecting first categories or supporting the selection of categories, and then assessing and supporting City Council in making the final selection on the actual awardees for ARPA money grants. And now we're switching over and we're going to be working very closely with Kim Marmon-Sachs on how we're going to partner with those organizations and track performance so that we're catching problems as early as possible, with the goal not of, I think it's a really interesting opportunity to come at performance management from a partnership to make sure that we get a successful outcome, working together with the recipients, rather than simply we're going to kind of try and hold you accountable and then, I don't know, punish you if you're not. So it's really focused on getting to a successful outcome. And we built the entire process to make sure that we maximize the probability that we can do that. We've been working with a team led by Rachel Wood on our work planning initiative for fiscal year 23, as well as kind of building out some infrastructure for reporting on progress on council initiatives and more long-term things like the comprehensive plan. And of course, I already talked about some of the capacity building efforts that we're involved with, the governance efforts, and I'll turn it back to Natalie to talk a little bit about the engagement.
Yeah. So we have been involved in engagement activities since the office became operational in March of 2021. And so our initial process was somewhat some informal benchmarking that took place. And we reached out to community leaders, neighborhood leaders, resource providers, and other stakeholders, and just asked a brief set of questions regarding whether it's their clients or their own personal experiences about accessing city services and what barriers they might have encountered, or what perceived barriers some of their clients encounter in trying to access services and information from the city. And we also asked them about any type of metrics that they would like to see tracked as far as programs and initiatives go. And so we took that information. It was really great narrative information, and we're keeping track of that. And actually our own, this roadshow is somewhat evolved from those conversations that we've had. Another project that came out of that was having a listening session with the 35 CALA students who are our youth interns that work in various city and county departments over the summer. And so we tweaked those questions a little bit. It just wasn't focused on how they receive services, but maybe how their parents receive services and information from the city. And we got a lot of good feedback, and we learned a lot of information about what it means to just be a young person and navigating local government and how you're affected by local government directly and indirectly as your parents try to access city services as well. And then we've had this roadshow, and we really use the roadshow to focus on getting the information out about who we are and what we do and how we do it to boards and commissions with the city, because folks who tend to sit on boards and commissions are a bit more engaged and involved with local government and have a bit more of an in-depth background about the structure of things and what municipalities and governments are actually responsible for. And so we've taken this information, again, we've synthesized it, we refer to it, and it informs a lot of the work that we are currently doing, that we plan to do. And so we're continuing to have conversations with folks, because we never stop doing that, because narrative information can really lead you to effective initiatives and effective ways to solve problems in a way that you might not have thought of on your own, because you live and breathe government every day. And so out of that, we will be focusing on actual community trainings for the next few months. We're working on just structuring and planning, but those trainings will focus on the resources that we have as a city available for folks who live in the area to access data. We want to make sure that folks know where to find information, as basic as it sounds, that they need on the city's website, and to go through a brief tutorial on the portal and using the Asheville app. And we will be focusing on neighborhood groups, because again, these are folks that maybe aren't as involved and as engaged with the city as folks on with boards that sit on boards and commissions, but they're still engaged. They're engaged in their communities, their neighborhoods, and they're actives, and they're also community leaders. And so what we hope is that in doing that, it's another step in reestablishing any type of relationship, but it also gets folks acclimated to speaking the language of data and sharing the framework in which we do our work. And so we're really excited about that, and you'll be hearing more about that on a larger scale in the coming months.
So speaking of frameworks, in doing all this, it's important that we have that common language and a common approach to how we do it. We want, and so what we've done in the city is adopt a particular performance management framework. It's called results-based accountability, or RBA. Pretty widely adopted just regionally as well as across the state and nationally. It has a couple things going for it from my perspective. One, it is the foundation of the racial equity toolkit that the Government Alliance on Racial Equity uses, and that we're a member of GARE, and we use that methodology within the city. And the other thing I like about it is that it is really just a very simple common sense process, where you can tie into the ways that people already know how to do this, and just kind of get them, bring them along in terms of a common language and a common simple framework. So there's the standard is 7 questions. I like to boil it down in the beginning to just 4 in a loop. And it starts with a focus on results, or a focus on the end that you're trying to achieve. So if we have an initiative, what outcome are we trying to get? What are the results? How do we want, in particular, the stakeholders here to be better off as a result of this initiative or project or program? Next thing is to think about how we're going to tell if we're being successful, because if we're not, we're going to want to change up. So that how do we tell if we're succeeding? Those might be metrics, or they might be conditions that you observe and maybe capture through narrative data or the achievement of milestones. There are lots of ways to kind of track whether you're succeeding or not, but it's important that you identify them in advance. The other thing I like about this framework, any performance management framework is going to tell you to start by getting a baseline. Where are we now? RBA goes a little bit beyond that and says the question we really need to ask is, where are we now and what will happen if we don't change anything? And so we want to pay attention to the trend that we expect. And then, we may set some targets, we may not, but our goal really is to understand where we're going and how we want to do what an RBA is called turn the curve. So if things are going down, how do we kind of get that angling back up? And so we can focus on an improvement cycle, even if we're not necessarily hitting a particular target. We want to be able to see that we're constantly on the improvement curve rather than on the, nothing changing or getting worse. And having established all of that, then you start to figure out what you're going to do next. And the whole thing is a loop, because a few months down the road, you're going to look at those performance measures or milestones that you named. You're going to assess whether you're actually making the progress you expect. And if you are, great. Maybe you double down, maybe you just keep doing what you're doing. Or you need to ask yourself, okay, it's not working. What are we going to do next? And so you cycle on through. And this is, as far as the application to you in this work and more generally, obviously, this is just a common sense thing. You can use it at every level, at any level from just a meeting. What are we trying to achieve and how will we know if we're done? Probably not going to get too many performance measures at the level of a meeting. All the way out to a major program. What do we want to see as a result of this initiative we're starting or a strategy that we're starting to employ 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road? It's also a framework for asking staff questions. How is anybody going to be better off? What problem are we solving and what's the result supposed to be and how are we going to tell? I often go in and change language from metrics and numbers to just how are we going to know if we're succeeding? Because there can be a variety of ways of doing that, but it's really important to have an agreed on way that you're going to know if something is working or not working. And hopefully take this out in your work outside in the community, because the more we start to build a shared way of thinking and approaching these things in a shared language, the better. And I think it's also interesting going forward, just knowing that this function exists, thinking about the relationship between audit and performance in general, and how those two might interplay, I think is an interesting question going forward. That's it on this slide. So we will send to Alicia this presentation and these links. We have an external quarterly newsletter that goes out that you can sign up for. Feel free to reach out to us, of course. And we also try and keep things updated on our webpage. But with that, I think we'll just turn it over into discussion.
Yeah. So the big way, the main question for me is always, I'm interested to hear from folks. What are the ways that you think that you could use this approach to your work? And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen actually so I can see folks.
And of course, any other questions?
And any other questions, yes. Okay.
Yes, looks like a question from Amy Kemp.
Hi there. Yes, thank you, Eric. That was a good presentation, and it's interesting to hear what you're doing. I was curious, when I first read through the presentation and started watching, I wanted to ask what the universe of data looks like, because my assumption was that what you're doing is collectivizing data that's available throughout the city and figuring out how to make that available to the community to satisfy a particular need. But then toward the end of your presentation, I got the impact or the impression that maybe you're more about listening to the question and then finding the data that helps to answer the question. So could you enlighten me as to kind of what your approach is? Is it more we're starting with the data, or are we starting with the question and then finding the data that answers the question?
All of the above.
Okay.
So there are a number, I think it's, let me try and get my thoughts organized. So on the one hand, the city does have internally a lot of interesting data, and we've long had an open data program where we share that externally with the community, certain kinds of information, and we want to continue building that. We want to continue, and this is not just an ODAP function, this is IT and other departments, things like simplicity where you can use your address to look up city data and so on. So we do think a lot about how do we leverage the data that the city has. One of the projects we're working on right now is with HR, building some standards for employee-related data that helps us do internal reporting. It also helps us build stronger governance systems when that data is being fed out, for example, to our salaries data on the open data portal. We had to kind of pull the names off of that feed for a while because there was a danger of, just for internal reasons, of, because we were using legal names, of putting out names that might out somebody in a way that was inappropriate. So that's part of our prevent harm. So we've been building systems that HR is doing the work to make sure that we've got the preferred names. And we've been doing the work to make sure that we've got automated feeds that make it really easy to open up a feed internally or externally and know that we're using the right names, that we're taking care of any critical sensitive information, whether that be date of birth or social security number, but also things like undercover officers and so on. You don't want to have to think about those things over and over. You want to fix it at the bottom and make sure that everything is built on top is taking care of it. We're also working on building, and actually this is kicking off together with our public records officer, building an internal data inventory beyond what we would share publicly, just to make sure that one department may be collecting data that another department could actually make some good use of if only they knew it existed. And so starting to share that information. At the same time, when you're starting an initiative, you don't want to start deciding what to do just based on the data you happen to have, because that data often reflects historical situations and decisions that may not serve the purpose you're trying to achieve, may have built in some inequities. So you want to be really careful about that. And so for any initiative, we want to start by saying, what data do we need? And then we'll go to how do we get, we may need something that is going to take us several years to get to. So what do we do in the meantime? How do we build on what we can actually get relatively easily? And for a lot of things that the city does, the most important data isn't actually owned by the city. It comes out of the census, or it comes out of, the housing authority. And so finding ways to, or the school system, finding ways to work with them and get that data and make that available is a big part of it. That was one of the things we did in providing baseline data to the Reparations Commission. Internal city data wasn't the most relevant thing. It was mostly going out and finding data from other agencies, from the Census Bureau and so on, and collecting that in a way that was actually usable. And then, of course, at the highest level, one of the things that's interesting about results-based accountability is they always operate at two levels. One level is the specific program or project or initiative. How do you make sure that it's achieving the result that you wanted it to achieve? But for a lot of things that the city is doing, those programs or initiatives are intended to impact a bigger result. We're trying to achieve, a livable city. And we get into questions of what does that mean? How are we going to measure it? But a specific program is only going to be one contribution. And so we want to think about that higher level of what community indicators do we use to assess safety, livability, etc. And that's one of the things we're going to be working on. We're trying to kind of build this up over time and make sure that we're doing this in a sustainable way. But we're going to want to have those community level indicators where over the longer term, and this is where it comes in, brings in things like the comprehensive plan, where over 1, 5, 10, 20, 30 years, you're going through a series of efforts and programs and initiatives in order to move the needle on a bigger goal. And you want to make sure that you're measuring at that bigger goal level too. And RBA kind of looks at how do you think about those two levels of the whole population, the whole city, and the contributing programs that are what we actually do in order to move the needle on the big things. Did that sort of answer your question?
It does. It's a big world out there, the data world. So when one part of that is the data that you have and you're collecting, and then the other part of it is the data that somebody needs. And then the other kind of part of the conversation that I hear you touching on is how are we using the data that's available to us to make decisions, and are we proactive in looking at the data and before we jump in too far into making a decision.
And very often, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to throw out there that the other part that Natalie had mentioned is community engagement, and there's a whole new level of data that can be acquired by engaging with the community. And then I look, there's just 3 of you guys. So I'm wondering, are there just 3 of you?
Well, it kind of goes back to what I said before, is if this all rides on the Office of Data and Performance, all 3 of us, we're host. This is something that we do together. There's nothing we do by ourselves. And part of what is really fun about this office, we have thought of ourselves as a cross-functional endeavor from the beginning. And so we have great partnerships with finance, with equity, with communications and public engagement, more recently with planning and with sustainability. But there's really nothing we do that's only ours. Everything we do is in combination with these other departments. So we're really both trying to be, sometimes we're consultants, sometimes we're partners, sometimes we're teachers, and just trying to be very strategic about how we interchange those roles. So for example, if we're going in a consulting role, we're in the middle of an engagement right now with the fire department to help them plan their public engagement as an input to their strategic planning process. And we are both working with them to make sure that they're figuring out what outcome they want and so on. But we're also teaching them along the way and trying to leave behind tools that they can use so the next time around they can do it themselves.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Sounds like not. We will share the presentation through Alicia to get out to you all. And of course, follow-up questions are welcome.
Well, we appreciate you sharing all this wonderful information with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, so public comment. We have no public comments. Is that correct, Alicia?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, wonderful. And then I guess if there's any new business that anyone would like to discuss. Yes, Amy.
Yes, I can't help but asking. It's my understanding that we won't have an audit committee for long, given the proposals that are out there. So I'm just curious, where we stand with that, and to get an understanding of what the future looks like for the audit committee.
Well, I can tell you the audit committee is not necessarily going away. We just have this bump in the road as far as getting, our position filled, and then providing said oversight. I think in the next month and a half to 2 months, we will definitely have our risk assessment RFQ filled and get that, and then of course, working with the city to get the internal audit position filled, hopefully with an employee. If not, look at alternatives to doing that and bringing it back to the audit committee itself to get input so we can, help staff with the right recommendations.
Yeah, I do understand that, but the boards and commissions restructuring is my understanding that the audit committee does not continue as a part of that. So that's the nature of my question.
Okay, well, that's news to me. I have not heard that. Gwen, could you enlighten us?
The boards and commissions restructuring has been a proposal. The specifics as to what would happen with the audit committee hasn't been discussed. I think the audit committee is a little unique in the sense that the members that have been asked to join have very specific expertise. That being said, it hasn't been determined, one, whether a board and commission restructure will happen, as Mrs. Kemp is fully aware, or how that will actually play out and affect each board and commission. I invite all of you to get involved with the restructuring, with that work in the working group, and I believe we have a meeting next. I think it's next Thursday, although I'd have to check on that. So it's all to be determined.
Okay, my apologies. I thought that the proposal had been rolled out and the basic structure of the restructuring was pretty much set. The meetings that I've attended indicated to me that there was not a lot of support for it throughout the community, but it certainly it was a surprise to me being on the audit committee, so I had to ask the question.
Thank you for the question, Amy. I will, unless there's anything else, I will now adjourn the meeting unless we have any objections.
Could I ask one more question?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Could we get a little clarity when we're meeting again, what our meeting schedule looks like in the future? I think we met in September in the past or thereabouts, or maybe it was November, to look over the external auditor report.
Yeah, I think the next meeting we typically have, they have been in, almost on a quarterly basis. So I would anticipate coming back and with Tony and what he finds with his RFP, coming back in late August, 1st of September, unless we want to do something sooner than that. I mean, I'm all up to suggestions.
Yeah, I think the schedule is quarterly, and I think it's the third Thursday of the month, I think. But yeah, that had been our plan, was to come back to you all in September with an update on the internal auditor recruitment, the RFP, and also Becky give another update on where we are with the year-end financial report as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just wasn't sure. I haven't heard much from anybody about the audit committee for a minute, but I did miss the last meeting unexpectedly. So thank you.
Okay. Well, I will now adjourn the meeting unless we have any other objections. Wonderful. Y'all have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.